Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the stakeholder approach and what that means for business. Best is to think of it in terms of the actual stakeholder classes that make up particular businesses. So let me describe 6 of these stakeholder classes. For sure, the owners are one of the stakeholder classes. They have, without a doubt, an interest in the profits of the business because they provide the business with the capital necessary for the business enterprise to function successfully. At the same time, the employees are also arguably stakeholders in the business. That is, they are deserving of a piece of the profit pie. And the reason why is because the employees make the company's raw products into finished goods. They engage in customer relations. They do digital analysis, analytics analysis to understand how the company should market. Without a doubt, they are essential to the operation of the enterprise. Customers arguably are stakeholders because their demand for the product and their desires help drive the enterprise to innovate and to come up with the solutions that it achieves. Suppliers can also be posited as stakeholders because they provide the business enterprise with its raw goods, its supply chain materials, which can then be manufactured or modeled or processed into other things down the line. Community, a little more tangentially a stakeholder, but arguably a stakeholder nonetheless, because community also is essential to the success of any business enterprise. In a minute, I'm going to describe the stakeholder model with reference to a couple of businesses, Starbucks and Apple. Let's just take Apple for starters. Apple employs a number of very highly educated engineers, not only in Cupertino, California, where their corporate headquarters is located, but around the United States and the world. This giant behemoth of a corporation relies upon work that has already been done by the community in educating those engineers. Apple ships its products to retail stores at malls and in storefronts all over this country. So you can walk in, get your iPhone, and walk out that same day with the product. It relies upon roads. It relies upon maintained community settings in order to make that happen. Okay, without the stability of the community, a corporation like Apple would never have arisen. I'm going to totally pick on a country here. No one's from Venezuela, right? I'll pick on Venezuela then. Apple could never have arisen in a country like Venezuela with a lot of the economic and societal chaos that exists in that society right now. Okay, so arguably, the community is deserving of a piece of the profit pie because the community is important to bring about the success of the business through things like educational ventures and stability and infrastructure. Along those lines, perhaps separable from the community, but nonetheless also important as a stakeholder, is the government. Okay, because government provides defense forces, police, armed forces from threats without and within. The government provides also infrastructure. The government provides courts of law to settle disputes. A number of the things that successful businesses rely upon in order to be successful come from government influence. Okay, now, some businesses are very good at following the stakeholder model. An example might be Starbucks. I have talked about Starbucks already in another lecture video, so I'm going to go quickly here. But Starbucks is a very equitable employer that attempts to provide a number of different stakeholder classes with an equitable piece of the profit pie. Notably, I would draw your attention to its treatment of its employees. Starbucks' treatment of its employees is very, very good for the level of education that its employees have. If you're a college student and you want a good, well-paying job with great healthcare benefits and lots of other benefits too, like educational scholarships and the like, Starbucks is a great place to work. Okay, it's an outstanding place to work as a barista if you're a college student. But Starbucks also, of course, pays great dividends and offers shareholders, it's a publicly traded company, offers shareholders capital appreciation. Highly loyal customer base. Arguably, Starbucks is perhaps least run for its customers in a financial sense because their coffee is so expensive. Okay, it is perhaps the most expensive cup of coffee in the United States. But they have very loyal customers who like the atmosphere, who go to read the paper, go to sit and work on their laptop in a peaceful setting, things like that. And so, because of that loyalty, arguably they are prioritizing customers appropriately. Suppliers, Starbucks pays more than fair wages or fair contract wages to suppliers in the developing world around the world. They get their coffee beans from developing farmers with whom they could be driving a harder bargain and with whom they could be negotiating down to much tighter margins. But Starbucks, in the interest of actually using their business not just to sell coffee and make profits, but also to promote the welfare of third world farmers, makes it a point to give their suppliers good, fair trade style coffee prices. Coffee bean prices. Community, Starbucks gives extensively to the community, especially in Seattle and the Pacific Northwest. And government, Starbucks is pretty good. I wouldn't say they're great, but they're pretty good at paying their taxes. A lot of companies don't do very well at all at paying taxes. Amazon famously pays no taxes. And the company we'll look at in a minute, Apple, has gone to incredible lengths to avoid paying taxes. But Starbucks is a pretty good citizen as a company. The big criticism of the stakeholder model is that in practice, it doesn't work very successfully. That is, in practice, it's not really frequently applicable because most of the time in the real world in business, the fact of the matter is it's hard to divide up the profit pie equitably, and businesses internally tend to turn into arenas of struggle where different classes within the company war with each other so as to obtain the greatest percentage of the profit pie. Okay, before I turn to Apple, let me just illustrate that with the company that we all know and love, Walmart. Okay, if you're a shareholder, Walmart is a great company for you. Excellent dividends, great capital appreciation for many years. It's a widows and orphans stock. Company's always going to be there, sort of thing. Very solid for them. If you're a management level employee, Walmart is a great place to work. But if you are a low level employee, Walmart's one of the worst places to work. They regularly work their store level employees 29 hours a week so as to avoid having to pay healthcare benefits to them. Okay? Now, it's good for those people who otherwise wouldn't be getting jobs. So in that sense, Walmart's a good employer. A lot of the people who work at Walmart are elderly people or ex-cons, people who have, are mentally challenged in some way. And it's great that they provide employment to such people. Okay, but the fact of the matter is that Walmart does try to pay its employees at the store level as little as possible. It's not as though they are trying, like Starbucks, to offer their employees extensive scholarship benefits or extensive health benefits. Okay, but let me turn to another example, Apple. That's Walmart, an illustration of maybe the difficulties of applying the stakeholder model in practice. Apple is also, I think, a company that illustrates the difficulties, because Apple is also a company where instead of the company equitably distributing the profit pie, it's kind of a class war within the company as to who will obtain the greatest percentage of things. I'll move quickly since I've already offered 2 illustrations. The owners do great. Apple's been one of the best performing stocks of the last 20 or 25 years. Excellent dividends. The employees, depending on who they are, do very well. Management level employees at Apple make a boatload. Tim Cook, the CEO, counting his stock options, makes nearly $1 billion a year. HBU, by comparison, has an entire endowment of about 65 or 70 million, so he could probably buy about 12 or 14 HBUs each year. That's doing well for yourself. He's not the only C-suite level person who does well for himself. The CFO, the CTO, lots of similarly ranked people at Apple make a ton of money. Even the ordinary mall level retail employees don't do that badly at Apple. Okay? Apple's got a lot of money. They charge an enormous margin on all their devices. When customers buy an iPhone, they're spending about 45% more for the same amount of computing power than they could be spending if they went to a competitor. But Apple's got a powerful brand. It's a status symbol. If you've got an iPhone, you're somebody. If you don't, you're nobody. And they can do that because of that status symbol. You guys want to see an antique? This is a 4S, an iPhone 4S. Oh. Okay. The store level employees do well for themselves. Not all Apple employees do well. Apple under Steve Jobs was notorious for its treatment of its Chinese factory workers. Okay, they wanted to cut their supply chain costs to a minimum to maximize profits, and to do that, they basically found the cheapest, most vulnerable, most exploitable working classes in China, and they exploited them. In fact, things were so bad at various points in Apple's history in China that they had to set up suicide nets to keep the workers from jumping in the factories. Fences around the perimeters, dogs patrolling the fences, things like that. Things have gotten a bit better under Tim Cook because Apple's shenanigans in China have been exposed to American and European customers, and there was some pressure on Apple to clean up its act. But I still wouldn't say at all that it's a very good place to work if you are a Chinese factory worker. Okay, so it depends on what kind of an employee you are. Customers, well, Apple's got a very loyal customer base, and they are seen as an iconic brand. And Apple's customers especially like the reliability of the products. But Apple has repeatedly attempted to dupe or deceive its customers so as to enrich itself. Most recently and famously, they intentionally sabotaged customers' iPhones with the updates that they were sending out so as to slow down the processing speed of the iPhones, to force the customers to upgrade their iPhones more quickly than they would otherwise do. Because otherwise the customers might be willing to wait another year or two before upgrading their iPhone in the upgrade cycle. To force that, Apple intentionally sabotaged customers' iPhones. So arguably, this is not a company that's always been especially good to its customers. In Apple's defense, they argued that their updates were for the sake of repairing battery damage. That was the case in iPhone models and that customers were not aware of. But again, if that's the story, and I think maybe that is the story, but also at the same time the story is to sabotage the iPhones. If that's the story, then they could also arguably be litigated against, and they are being very much litigated against, for deceiving customers about the longevity and performance of the batteries. So, for what it's worth. Suppliers, some Apple suppliers at the managerial level do well, but the ordinary employees in developing world countries do not typically do well. Community, Apple gives back a lot these days to the community, so they do well on that metric. But they've not always done that. Under Steve Jobs, they famously never gave anything to charity because he said he didn't believe in charity. And so, he's a brilliant man, kind of a jerk, though. And so they didn't actually offer any assistance to California and communities where they are located. Government, Apple's notorious for trying to evade taxes. I think officially they are an Irish company domiciled in the Cayman Islands. Okay, now that's not fooling anyone. They're an American company domiciled in California. But for the sake of avoiding as many taxes as possible, they've come up with this Irish double cocktail thing so that they don't have to pay anything. Okay, this Apple and Walmart, I think, are case studies of companies that make the stakeholder model arguably too idealistic. Okay, so the common criticism of the stakeholder model is that in practice it wouldn't work out, because in practice it just isn't that successful. Okay, and in practice what companies actually are is they are arenas of class struggle where different company classes fight against each other for the largest amount of the profit pie that they can obtain. Okay, so that's the common criticism of the stakeholder approach. But one more time, one more pass. On the stakeholder model, the purpose of the company when it comes to dividing up the profit pie is to divide it up among all those stakeholders who are deserving of a piece of the profit pie. And arguably, each of these stakeholder classes is deserving of a piece of the profit pie. An example of a company that gives back a lot to the community, for instance, might be not just Starbucks, but our own local companies here in Texas, like HEB or Bluebell. HEB is well known for its extensive support over many decades for local events like the rodeo or local after-school programs, inner-city support for disadvantaged youth, things like that. So it is possible, I think, for some companies to successfully meet the needs of some of these more peripheral kinds of stakeholders. Okay, are there comments or questions about the stakeholder view of what the purpose of the business is when it comes to dividing up the profits? Comments or questions? I talked a little bit long today. I'm going to take a 2-minute break now. Usually in most of our classes, since we are a Tuesday, Thursday class, I'm going to take a 2-minute break, about 40 minutes in. We're a little bit later than that, but I want to get us into the habit of taking a quick break. So let's take a 2-minute break, and we'll come back and we'll look at a case study. Okay?